Hey guys, I'm Nichole Dailey, Chef de Cuisine here at Traeger Grills. Today we're going to run you through a basic pie dough recipe and then show you a couple of different fillings for all of your holiday dinners. So we're going to start with 2½ cups of flour. I usually use the food processor for pie dough. I think it's easier and cleaner, but you can do it just in a bowl with 2 butter knives or a pastry cutter. We're going to go 2½ cups of flour. It's about a tablespoon of sugar. And you can use this same recipe, but leave out the sugar for more of a savory dish if you were to do like a chicken pot pie or something like that. We're going to pulse this together and then we're going to add in the butter. The thing that makes a great pie dough is obviously that flaky crust. What gives you that are these little pockets of butter that once you bake it, they start to melt and the moisture evaporates. And so you have these awesome little air pockets in there. Leaving the butter a little bit bigger is what's going to give you that. So we'll just pulse these together. And then I drop in my butter a little bit at a time with it running. So when you open it up, you should be able to see little chunks of butter in there, which is exactly what you want. And then with it running again, we have a couple tablespoons of ice water. The other key to a good pie dough is to keep everything as cold as possible. I'll usually keep my butter in the freezer right before I'm ready to go. The cold butter helps you get those air pockets as well. So if you have warm water to add into your dough, it's going to melt your butter. So you just want to add this a tablespoon at a time until it starts to come together. You'll see it collect and it'll kind of form a ball in the food processor. That's what you're looking for. So we'll just go a little bit at a time, let it get itself together, and then we'll add a little bit more. And you can see it kind of start to come together. So we'll take it out of the food processor. You can see it's in kind of a ball. That's exactly what you want. And then this pie dough recipe will make a 2-layer crust. So it'll make it's enough to do the base and then either a top crust or a lattice or something like that on the top. So again, you don't want to work this too much. We're going to cut this in half. Set this off to the side here. And then I always shape it into a little disc before I start rolling. It helps make sure you get an even circle. And a lot of people will do this different ways. So some people will make their pie dough, form it into a disc, and put it in the freezer. If I'm making my pie that day, I'll just go straight from the food processor to rolling it out, and then I'll chill it once it's in my pie dish. I think it's easier to roll out that way. It's more pliable. So you want this to be between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch thick. If you like a thicker crust, feel free to go a little bit thicker. Just keep in mind it might change your cook time. So I always take my pie dish and put it on top after I've rolled it out to make sure I have a big enough piece to drape over the edges. This one looks like it's pretty good. So you'll set your rolling pin about 1/3 of the way down. And pick your dough up with your rolling pin and then just lay it in the dish. And then I kind of lift up the edges and let it fall in. And then depending on what kind of pie you're doing, if it's a filled pie, typically you don't need to parbake the crust, you can. For apple pie, I usually don't parbake it. For pumpkin pie, I always do. So what we're gonna do, this one is gonna be our pumpkin. I'll just run, and you can do different decorations on the edges. I like it pretty simple. So I just run my knife along the edges to take all the excess off. And then you want to poke a couple holes in the bottom. This allows some air to escape so the bottom of your pie dough doesn't bubble up in the center. So you can go a couple times with a fork or just a couple little pokes with a knife. And then we're going to place a piece of parchment paper on top of this. And we're going to fill it with beans. But you just fill the center, and it's gonna do the same thing as those holes. It's gonna prevent your pie crust from poofing or getting too much volume in certain areas. So we've got our grill preheated to 350 degrees. We'll bake this, parbake it for about 10 minutes, and then we'll bring it back in and do the filling. So we've had our grill preheating here for about 10 or 15 minutes at 350. We're using apple pellets on this one, but for desserts you can use any sort of fruit wood, or pecans, really nice as well. So we're gonna throw this pie crust on to parbake for about 10 minutes. It's not gonna get any color on it or anything. You just want to kind of get it 50% of the way there before we fill it. So we've got our crust on the grill for our pumpkin pie. While that's parbaking, it's gonna bake at 350 for about 10 minutes or so. We're gonna put together our apple pie. So this is the same pie dough that we used before. We're gonna do a lattice on the top of this one. And you can do a bunch of different shapes or designs. They even sell little stamps that are like leaf shaped that you could put on the top, or you could cut an apple in it. So again, we're gonna roll this out to between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch thick. A good rule of thumb for rolling out pie dough, if you want to get a nice round surface, basically what you're gonna do is every time you go across, you're gonna turn your rolling pin about 45 degrees, and you go back and forth, and just keep turning it, and it'll end up more even than if you just kind of go at it. So I think we're good here. On a lattice, I always like to leave a little bit of extra hanging over the edge to make sure we can crimp it over. I'm gonna roll this up. And kind of drop that down in there again. I'm gonna transfer this one to the fridge while we finish up the rest of our pie. Okay, so now we're gonna do the lattice for the top. I always like to give myself a little bit more than what I think I need, just in case one of them breaks, or it's not quite long enough. So same thing, you just wanna roll it out into a circle. And again, this should be about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch thick. We're just gonna cut our strips for the lattice. I like to do a little bit thicker strips, so I typically only need 6 to cover a pie. You can go a little bit thinner if you want. It takes a little bit longer to lattice, but it looks really pretty. So I'll cut these about 1 inch thick. So we're gonna scoot this off to the side and cover it with plastic wrap so it doesn't get dry. And then we'll put together our apples. You can keep it under a damp towel or just plastic wrap. Okay, so we've got about 8 apples here. This is a 9-inch pie dish. That's about how many you would need to fill that. So as we're peeling these, we want to prevent the apples from browning too much. So we're going to submerge them in a little bit of water with lemon juice. So I usually just start at the top and go all the way around. You can do it whatever's more comfortable for you. And then as you peel it, just place it back into the water so it doesn't brown. All right, so while I've got this here, we're gonna peel our ginger as well. You can use fresh ginger if you want, or you can use powdered stuff. The one thing I will say is if you use fresh, it's really potent. So you're gonna use a little bit less. It's very strong. So for ginger, we want like a 1-inch chunk of it. I will cut off the little nubs on the sides and the one end. And then the easiest way to peel ginger is with a spoon. It's too fibrous to use something like this with or to use on a microplane. So I just use the edge of a spoon and it just peels off that outer layer. Then we'll just get rid of this. and back to our apples. So we're using Granny Smith apples for these. I like Granny Smith because of the texture. They're a little bit more firm. They don't break down quite as much when you cook them. They kind of keep their shape a little bit. So I'm just cutting outside the core on each of these. And I like to do mine in larger slices. You can do it in chunks or thinner slices. It's really just your own preference. So we'll get rid of the cores. And then, like I said, I like to do them in thicker pieces. So we'll just go across about that thick. And you can have fun with this one. You can add in whatever flavors. This one's pretty straightforward. You can add in bourbon or whiskey if you want. You could add in cranberries or pecans or walnuts, something like that. So while our apples soak over here, we'll go ahead and mince our ginger. I'll take this first cut off the edge and then flip it so it has a flat surface. We'll cut these as thin as possible. And we'll lay them on their side and then do, so this is a julienne. And then we'll take that julienne and go across this way. And ginger is great to have laying around. You can use it for a lot of other things. And whatever you don't use, you can just stick the whole chunk in the freezer, just like this, and it'll keep for months. So you can pull it out and just use a little bit at a time. Okay, so we drained our apples off. We're gonna add our minced ginger, and then we're gonna do a little bit of lemon and orange zest. I like lemon and orange in mine. Again, you can play around with this and do whatever. You can add in like cloves or nutmeg, whatever baking spices you like with your apples. Get all this off of here, and then you want to juice half a lemon. So I'll always either juice it upside down like this so I catch the seeds, or just into my hand. And then we're going to do some orange zest as well. And if you were going to use something like bourbon or whiskey or maple syrup, honey, any other flavoring like that, this is where I would add it in. Okay, so then we've got 1/3 cup of brown sugar here. Make sure it's packed. And then as our thickener, I'm going to use some flour. You can use tapioca pearls are a good thickener for this as well. They kind of help soak up a lot of that and give you a nice creamy texture. You can also use cornstarch. Just keep in mind if you do add in anything like whiskey or maple syrup, that's going to add to your liquid content. So I'd go a little bit heavier on the thickener. So that was just a pinch of salt. I always put salt in my pies. It doesn't make it salty, it just accents what's already there. Some cinnamon, and then we're gonna break in this butter. So just break it into little chunks and toss it in with the apples. It's about 2 tablespoons of butter. And then just toss it all together. So I got our pie dough from the fridge. And we're gonna just pile this in the center. You wanna go kind of heavy because it's gonna sink down as they cook. All right, so now we're gonna start our lattice. So on the lattice, what you wanna do is I work from the center out. So I'll take the longest strip I have and place it right along the middle, and then put the following ones on either side. I'll leave the next longest one for the middle to go across the other direction. And since these are thicker strips, I'm just gonna do 3 across and 3 across. And then what you're gonna do, I'll take one of the shorter ones, and we'll start from this side. You wanna basically go, it's over and under. So to start your lattice, you'll pull up this middle one and lay this piece underneath it and fold it back. And then you'll take the opposite 2 on either side of it and fold them over. and place your next lattice, and then put them back, and then take the center again, and lay it back, and then the other two. We'll get our last piece in here and lay those back over. So you got a nice even lattice. And then there's a few different ways to finish off the edges. You always want to cut off the excess pie dough that's hanging over, but you can leave a little bit here and tuck it up and underneath so you have a little bit more of a raised edge. If you really like pie dough and like that big thick crust, that's what I would do. But typically, I like just a clean, even cut around the outside. So I'll just go at it with my knife and cut off anything that's hanging. So then I'm just going to press these edges together to kind of create a seal. Then we're going to take a single egg with a teeny bit of water, and we'll just whisk this together. We'll brush the top with an egg wash. That's what gives you that nice golden brown color, and it kind of makes it a little shiny. We'll brush the top with an egg wash and then sprinkle sugar over the top. So you want to make sure you cover it pretty well. It'll also act as kind of a glue to keep the lattice stuck to the bottom shell. We'll give it a good sprinkle. And then this one's going to go on the grill at 350 for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. All right, so our crust for our pumpkin pie is on the grill. We're parbaking it for about 10 minutes at 350. While that's baking, we're going to make the filling for the pumpkin pie. We've just got some pumpkin puree here. And again, you can do this by hand if you want. I like to do it in the food processor because it's super easy. We've got a little bit of cream cheese, it's about 4 ounces. Some nutmeg. You can use pumpkin pie spice if you'd like, or add your own. Just a little bit of brown sugar, 1/4 cup of cream, and then we're going to add 3 eggs to this. Add those in. And then we're just going to pulse this all together until it is all blended. Looks like we're blended pretty well here. We're gonna go grab that pie crust, bring it back in, and we'll fill it and take it back out and let it bake for another half an hour. Okay, so we've got our par-baked pumpkin pie crust here. So you just wanna take it long enough where you can see it kind of starting to bake a little bit. You take it about halfway. And then for your beans, you can just take them out and use them over and over again. Now we're just gonna dump our filling into the center and then we'll throw it back on the grill. It'll bake for another half hour, 45 minutes. And you can use whatever kind of pellets you like with this. With baking, I typically like to use a lighter pellet or a fruit wood. You can use cherry, apple, pecan, anything sort of in that range. And this will puff up a little bit, so you wanna leave some space and room for it to grow. It'll puff up as it bakes, and then as it cools, it'll kind of settle again. So we're gonna take this back out to the grill. We're gonna put it on at 350 for about another half an hour. Okay, so we've got our grill at 350 here. We're gonna throw both of our pies on at the same time. The apple pie is gonna go about 45 minutes to an hour. And then our pumpkin pie will be about a half hour to 45 minutes. We're just gonna check them regularly, make sure we rotate them to get a nice even color all around. You just want a light golden brown. All right, so our pies are ready to go here. This golden brown color around the edge is what you're looking for. And then in between the lattice, you can see the juices coming out. They've kind of thickened and they look a little syrupy. That's what you want to tell you that it's done. We're gonna pull these off the grill. We're gonna take them inside and let them cool at room temperature, and then we'll slice them and serve them up. Okay, so these have been cooling at room temperature for a couple hours now. One of the great things about pie is baking it the day before makes it even better the day of. So I always try to do it either the day before or a couple days before. You can do it a week before and freeze it. You'll just bring it out of the freezer and let it come up to room temperature. Usually takes a few hours. So you can serve these with some whipped cream, ice cream. You can serve them with your apple pie with a little bit of cheddar cheese if you want. Totally up to you. We're just gonna do a little bit of whipped cream here. So we've got some soft peaks. We're just gonna keep going a little bit until it stiffens up. And I just add a little bit of vanilla and powdered sugar to my whipped cream to sweeten it up a little bit. And what you're looking for is when you pull it out of the whipped cream, so that's a soft peak, how it fell over. A stiff peak will keep its shape and stay up, like that. So we'll cut this one up first. Here's our pumpkin. We'll do a little scoop of whipped cream on the top. And our apple. Get our pie server for this one. And you can see all the different layers in the apples in there. That's why I like to leave those bigger chunks so you can kind of see the layers and it doesn't all just turn into like applesauce. We'll do whipped cream on this one too since we've got it. All right, let's give it a try. So good. You can find both of these recipes and many more on traegergrills.com/recipes or on the app.